He was banished from Germany, expelled from France and Belgium. He died without any idea that he had unleashed a movement that would sweep across the world. Karl Marx, champion of the underclass and the father of communism.
Karl Marx has trouble making it in the top 10, in my opinion, because his theories were consigned, to use a phrase of his, to the ash heap of history. A millennium from now will have forgotten about him.
There's no doubt that Karl Marx, as a thinker, as a social analyst, is certainly among the most influential figures of the last century, whether you like it or not. The perversion of his thought led to millions and millions of deaths. But when you talk about importance, you're not talking only about milk and honey.
Karl Marx was a German scholar and editor. He barely earned enough to support his family, and 3 of his 6 children died in childhood. To him, the world was unjust and ruled by the capitalist upper class. Workers work and the bosses get rich. Marx believed the working class would one day rise up to take their fair share. He hoped they would create a utopian society in which money would be equally divided and no one would be hungry or ignorant. In the mid-19th century, Marx's ideas were revolutionary. His 2 groundbreaking works were the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, co-written with Friedrich Engels.
No one ever read his epic work, Das Kapital. It's unreadable and dense, and it's an economic theory which doesn't apply to the world today and barely applied when he wrote it. But he hit the mood that came after the revolutions of 1848 perfectly with his one phrase, "Workers of the world unite." There's something more important than what nation you're part of, and that is your class. Workers are being oppressed similarly everywhere. And this simple idea took hold, and the international movements were formed.
It would be nearly 70 years before Marx's theories actually took root, adapted by leaders like Vladimir Lenin in his 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Communism spread across the Eastern Bloc from the newly formed Soviet Union, setting the stage for the most enduring conflict of the 20th century, the Cold War. At its peak, 1 billion people lived under communism, more than any other political system in history. But with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989 and the collapse of communist regimes throughout Europe, Marx's vision of a worldwide workers' revolution now seems at best a utopian ideal that went wrong, and at worst, an abject failure.
If you analyze the great revolutions, which were primarily Russia and China, a few others, you can see that they never were true Marxists. In the end, communism was a real dictatorship theory, not an economic theory, and it failed because the economic part of it was completely wrong.
Well, it's very easy to dismiss Marx wholesale because of the slaughter that took place in his name. His analysis of relations between workers and owners, his analysis of many things, was in fact very often a work of genius. Marx is part of us, whether we like it or not.